Mortal Kombat is one of those games. It's difficult to review because of its very nature, which, as you can imagine, makes my life pretty hard. When I started this review, I thought it was going to be a simple, it's good or it's bad judgment. But it's not. Put simply, Mortal Kombat's greatest strength is its greatest weakness, and depending on how you view games, this will mean that the game is an instant classic or one to miss. MK is an arcadey game through and through. It's so easy to pick up and instantly know what you're doing and how you're going to do it. Anyone familiar with the Street Fighter games will be able to pull off most of the special moves, of which there are, on average, 2 per character. Players new to fighting games will be grateful that there are so few moves to master, but anyone that has put in more than a few hours into one-on-one fighters will be somewhat shocked at their limited arsenal of moves. Likewise, seasoned players will find that the multiple punching mechanic is somewhat jarring and an easy, by which I mean cheap, way to finish a battle. In an obvious move by the publisher to inject a more tactical approach to combat, there are seemingly pointless limits placed on certain moves, such as Sub-Zero's freeze move. If the move makes contact with the opponent whilst already frozen, it backfires and freezes your own character. And whilst this will make the casual gamer's play experience a little more exciting, everyone else will never ever fall into its trap. Some moves seem far too weak based on their difficulty to pull off, with the game almost forcing you to play a game of who can uppercut the opponent fastest. There's room for experimentation, definitely, but the cheapness of the AI in one player means that only on low difficulty levels and multiplayer will you be able to showboat in the same way as, say, Soul Calibur. The gameplay is also marred by the Mega Drive's controller, as I did not get on with the D-pad at all, and the 3 buttons on the pad limit your playstyle severely, even going so far as replacing the start button's function from pause to block. I was constantly trying to convince myself that start really was the button I wanted to press, as Raiden, Johnny Cash, Liu Kang, or one of the other 5 playable characters threw a punch my way. Not that this was too big a deal, as the game does not reward defensive players in the slightest, attack being the only form of defense. There is 6-button controller support, but I don't have one, and I'm willing to wager most Mega Drive gamers don't either. A test your strength button mashing minigame goes some way to break up the repetitive nature of the fights, as do endurance matches, which is refreshing, and something rarely seen outside Street Fighter 2. Visually, the game is interesting, and the overall style is very pleasing to the imagination, if not the eye. A lack of frames of animation is a problem, with many moves having barely 3 frames from start to finish, and odd graphical glitches are abound, such as fireballs going through characters and shadows only being present when the fight begins and not the ready fight screen. Also, for a game that sells itself on ultra-violence, the game is not that gory. Sure, there's blood, with cheats enabled, and in all honesty, without them the game is not half as satisfying. And yeah, there are environmental deaths that make you wince, but the fatalities are nothing to write home about, and the game is more comic than macabre. Sound is generally solid, if not overly impressive, but the music, what little there is excellent throughout, perfectly encapsulating the mood of combat. Story-wise, the game is a real letdown. The atmosphere is set by text at the beginning of the game, and concluded with a kind of ending that makes you think, oh, okay, well, that's why he was fighting. I genuinely remember there being more plot, but a read of the 7 or so page manual reveals no other information. And on the subject of the manual, if you had any hopes of a moves list or character art, or that a fighting strategy would be included, think again. This is one of the skimpiest manuals I have ever read and provides no clue as to how to play the game. From a buyer's perspective, this game is cheap. Even boxed and with manual, this title cost me about £3, including shipping, so it's a cheap thrill. Actually, that's a perfect way of summing up Mortal Kombat. A cheap thrill. It's like fast food. Sure, you can eat as many burgers as you want, and you might like them, but it's never going to be a good meal. For me, MK's arcadiness ruins any enjoyment I might get from the game, as I expect games with a little more depth. I can totally see why it was so popular at the time it was published, and for a quick blast, it's quite fun. It also seems like a game that has a following for a reason, namely that the series has improved. Mortal Kombat 3 is a much, much better game, and the time I spent with that was fantastic. I want to like Mortal Kombat. I do. But I don't like Mortal Kombat. And whether you will is if you're the kind of game player that chucks on a title after a couple down the pub with a few mates, in which case you'll probably enjoy it thoroughly for a few hours and have some fond memories of it. Or if you treat games as an art form or aren't old enough to remember when polygons were resigned to maths class, in which case you aren't going to like it. And there are much better, much older fighting games to occupy your time. So, that about wraps it up for this month. Comments? Questions? Let me know. Next month is another classic being reviewed, so take it easy, play some games, and download next month's InRetroSpect.